I never thought a Tuesday morning meeting with HR would change everything. But there I was, sitting across from Margaret Thornton, my boss for the past 3 years, watching her shuffle through my employee file with that cold smile I'd learned to dread. "Alexandra," she began, not bothering to look up, "we've decided to make some structural changes." The way she said it with that pause, that little smirk tugging at her lips, I knew this wasn't good news. Margaret had always resented me. Maybe it was because I'd gotten promoted faster than anyone else in our department. Maybe it was because clients specifically requested to work with me. Or maybe it was simply because I refused to kiss her feet the way everyone else did. Before I tell you exactly how her attempt to destroy my career became the most spectacular backfire in corporate history, could you take a second to hit that like button and subscribe? Because what I'm about to share will show you how one woman's petty revenge turned into a $500 million lesson in never underestimating the quiet ones. And trust me, you'll want to see every detail of how a single phone call turned the tables completely. "We're transferring you," she continued, finally meeting my eyes, "to the Riverside Mountain Resort branch." I felt my stomach drop. Everyone in the company knew about Riverside. It was our most remote location, tucked away in the mountains of Montana, 3 hours from the nearest city. It was where careers went to die. The branch had been struggling for years. Low occupancy rates, constant staff turnover, and a reputation for being the place management sent people they wanted to forget about. "Margaret, I don't understand. My performance reviews have been exceptional. The Morrison account alone brought in—" "This isn't about performance, Alexandra." Her voice was ice cold now. "This is about attitude. You seem to think you're better than everyone else here. Maybe sometime in our most challenging location will help you develop some humility." I stared at her, feeling the familiar burn of injustice in my chest. This was about the Morrison presentation, wasn't it? 2 weeks ago, during our quarterly review, Margaret had tried to take credit for my work in front of the regional director. When I'd politely but firmly corrected her, making it clear that the innovative marketing strategy had been my idea, she'd turned red as a tomato. "When do I start?" I asked quietly. "Monday. Pack light. Housing up there is basic." She was enjoying this. Actually enjoying it. "Oh, and Alexandra, don't bother trying to transfer back. Remote positions like this tend to be permanent." I walked out of that office with my head held high, but inside, I was spinning. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, of missing family dinners and weekend plans, of building relationships with our biggest clients, all of it thrown away because Margaret's ego couldn't handle being shown up by someone half her age. But here's what Margaret didn't know. What nobody at Pinnacle Hospitality Management knew. My grandmother, Alexandra Winters, had died 6 months ago. The family had kept the funeral private, and I'd taken bereavement leave without explaining the details. What I hadn't shared with anyone, not my colleagues, not even my closest friends at work, was what grandmother had left me. Alexandra Winters hadn't just been a sweet old lady who sent me birthday cards and taught me to play chess. She'd been Alexandra Winters, founder and majority shareholder of Winters Resort Group, the woman who'd built a hospitality empire from nothing, starting with a single bed and breakfast in Vermont in 1962. And now, according to her will, I owned it all. Every property, every contract, every subsidiary company, including Riverside Mountain Resort. The drive to Montana gave me 3 days to think, 3 days to process what Margaret had done, and more importantly, what I was going to do about it. By the time I pulled into the small mountain town of Cedar Falls, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to reveal my identity immediately. I was going to play along with Margaret's little game, at least for a while. I wanted to see exactly how deep her cruelty ran, and more importantly, I wanted to understand the full scope of what she'd been doing to other employees. The Riverside Mountain Resort was more beautiful than I'd expected. Nestled between snow-capped peaks and surrounded by dense pine forests, it looked like something from a postcard. But I could see why it was struggling. The marketing materials were outdated. The online presence was practically non-existent. And from what I could tell, management had been treating it as an afterthought for years. My predecessor, a nervous-looking man named David Chen, was waiting to hand over the keys. "Thank God you're here," he said, looking genuinely relieved. "I've been trying to get transferred for 8 months. This place? It's career suicide. Corporate doesn't care about us up here. We don't get proper budgets, our maintenance requests get ignored, and don't even get me started on the staffing issues." As David walked me through the property, showing me the outdated systems and introducing me to the skeleton crew of employees, I began to understand something that made my blood boil. This wasn't just about Margaret wanting to punish me. This was about a systematic pattern of neglect and sabotage. The Riverside branch wasn't failing because of its location or market conditions. It was failing because Pinnacle Hospitality Management was deliberately strangling it. Minimal marketing budget, delayed maintenance approvals, inadequate staffing allocations. They were setting their managers up to fail, creating a convenient dumping ground for anyone who didn't fit their corporate culture. "Has anyone from corporate ever actually visited?" I asked David as we reviewed the books. "Margaret came up here once, about 2 years ago. Spent maybe 3 hours here, took a bunch of photos of everything that was wrong and left. Never implemented any of the solutions we proposed." David shook his head. "The previous manager, Janet Morrison, lasted 4 years before she finally quit. Smart woman. She's running a boutique hotel in Colorado now and doing amazing." Janet Morrison. I made a mental note of that name. That first week, I threw myself into understanding every aspect of the operation. I talked to housekeeping staff who'd been working with broken equipment for months. I met with maintenance workers who'd been submitting the same repair requests for over a year. I spoke with front desk employees who were handling twice their normal workload because corporate wouldn't approve hiring replacements for people who'd quit. And every single one of them told me the same thing. They loved this place, they believed in its potential, but they felt abandoned and forgotten. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. "How's mountain life treating you, Alexandra?" Her voice was dripping with false concern. "It's educational," I replied carefully. "I'm sure it is. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up. We'll be needing your Morrison account files transferred to Jenny Richardson. She'll be taking over all your major clients." Jenny Richardson. Margaret's favorite little yes woman who couldn't close a deal if her life depended on it. "Of course," I said. "I'll have everything organized by Monday." "Wonderful. Oh, and Alexandra? I hope you're not planning on using your remote location as an excuse to slack off. We'll be monitoring your performance very closely." After I hung up, I sat in my small office overlooking the mountains and smiled for the first time in weeks. It was time to make some calls. The first call was to my lawyer, Harrison Webb. Harrison had been handling my grandmother's estate, and more importantly, he'd been quietly helping me navigate the complex ownership structure of Winters Resort Group. "Alexandra, how are you settling in?" His warm voice was a comfort after Margaret's poison. "Harrison, I need you to do something for me. I want a complete audit of the contract between Winters Resort Group and Pinnacle Hospitality Management." There was a pause. "May I ask why?" "Because I think they're in breach, and I think it's time they learned exactly who they've been messing with." The second call was to Janet Morrison, the former manager David had mentioned. It took some detective work, but I found her at her boutique hotel in Aspen. "You're the new manager at Riverside." Janet's voice was sympathetic. "I'm sorry. That place has so much potential, but corporate will never let you succeed." "Tell me about Margaret Thornton," I said. Janet's laugh was bitter. "Margaret, she's a piece of work. She sent me up there as punishment too, you know. I'd filed a complaint about the way she was treating junior staff members. Sexual harassment, verbal abuse, creating hostile work environments, the whole 9 yards. My grip tightened on the phone. "Did HR investigate?" "Margaret is HR in that region. She buried the complaint and shipped me off to Montana within a week." Janet paused. "I heard through the grapevine that she's done it to at least 6 other people over the past 5 years. It's her standard move. Anyone who challenges her or threatens her position gets sent to Riverside to rot." After I hung up with Janet, I made one more call. This one was to someone very few people had access to. The direct line of Robert Chen, CEO of Winters Resort Group. Of course, Robert didn't know he was talking to his new boss. As far as he knew, Elena's granddaughter was some college kid who'd inherited a fortune she didn't know how to handle. "Mr. Chen, this is Alexandra Winters. Ms. Winters, how are you adjusting to everything? I'm learning. Robert, I need to ask you about our management contract with Pinnacle Hospitality, specifically their handling of the Riverside Mountain Resort. I could hear papers shuffling. Riverside? Yes, that's been a problem property for years. Their management team has struggled to turn it around. I'm actually at Riverside right now, I said quietly. You're… what? Ms. Winters, what are you doing there? Working undercover as their new manager. And Robert, what I've discovered is that Pinnacle hasn't been struggling to turn this property around. They've been deliberately sabotaging it. The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, Robert spoke, and his voice was different now, sharper, more focused. Tell me everything. I spent the next hour walking Robert through what I'd discovered. The systematic underfunding, the delayed maintenance, the pattern of using Riverside as a punishment posting, the way they'd been inflating their management fees while providing minimal actual management support. Ms. Winters, Robert said when I finished, if what you're telling me is accurate, Pinnacle is in serious breach of their contract with us. We could terminate the agreement immediately and seek damages. How much are we talking about? Their management contract is worth approximately $12 million annually across all our properties they manage. But if we can prove deliberate mismanagement, we could be looking at significant additional damages. $12 million. I thought about Margaret's smug face when she'd told me I was being transferred. I thought about Janet Morrison and the other 6 employees she'd destroyed. I thought about the dedicated staff at Riverside who'd been abandoned and forgotten. Robert, I want you to do something for me. Don't terminate the contract yet. I want to document everything first, and I want to do it in a way that makes sure this never happens to anyone else. What do you need from me? Access to our legal team, a proper investigation budget, and most importantly, I need you to trust me for the next few weeks while I handle this my way. You have whatever you need. That weekend, I didn't relax. I worked. But for the first time in months, I was working for myself, not for someone else's agenda. I started by implementing small changes at Riverside. Nothing that would attract attention from corporate, but enough to begin turning things around. I rearranged staff schedules to improve efficiency. I personally approved emergency repairs that had been sitting in Pinnacle's system for months. I reached out to local businesses to create partnership opportunities that didn't require corporate approval. But more importantly, I began building my case. I documented everything. Every delayed approval. Every ignored maintenance request. Every understaffed shift. Every example of how Pinnacle had failed in their basic management duties. I also started reaching out to former Riverside managers. Janet Morrison was just the beginning. One by one, I tracked down the others who'd been sent here as punishment. The pattern was always the same. Challenge Margaret or her cronies, get shipped to Montana, struggle with impossible conditions, eventually quit or get fired for poor performance. By the end of my second week, I had enough evidence to bury Margaret professionally. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. I wanted her to dig her own grave a little deeper first. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. On Monday morning of my third week, I got an email from corporate announcing a surprise inspection of all remote properties. Margaret herself would be visiting Riverside on Friday to conduct a comprehensive performance review. I smiled as I read the email. She was coming here to gloat, to document my failures and officially justify why I should be terminated or permanently exiled to this mountain purgatory. What Margaret didn't know was that she was walking into a trap 3 years in the making. I spent that week preparing, not just by making sure Riverside looked its best, though I did that too. The real preparation was legal. By Wednesday, I had a team of 3 lawyers in town, staying at a competitor's hotel, ready to document everything that was about to happen. I also made one more call that week, this one to Marcus Webb, Margaret's boss and the regional vice president of Pinnacle. Marcus, this is Alexandra Winters from Riverside. Alexandra, how are you adjusting to mountain life? His tone was friendly, but I could hear the condescension underneath. It's been eye-opening. Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up about something before Margaret arrives for her inspection on Friday. Oh? What kind of heads up? I've been reviewing our management contract with Winters Resort Group, and I think there might be some compliance issues we need to address. There was a pause. What kind of compliance issues? The kind that could void our contract if they're not handled properly. I'd hate for Margaret's inspection to uncover problems that could have been prevented. I see. Can you be more specific? I'd rather discuss it in person when Margaret arrives. But Marcus, you might want to think about joining her for this inspection. I have a feeling it's going to be more significant than anyone expects. After I hung up, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place perfectly. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, with fresh snow on the mountains making Riverside look like a winter wonderland. I'd made sure the property was in perfect condition, not through any magic, but simply by doing the job Pinnacle was supposed to have been doing all along. Margaret arrived at 10 a.m. sharp, driving a rental car and wearing her most intimidating power suit. Marcus was with her, looking confused and slightly anxious. Perfect. Alexandra, Margaret said, her voice cold as the mountain air. I trust you're ready for your evaluation. Absolutely, I replied, matching her professional tone. I've prepared a comprehensive overview of our operations here. I think you'll find it illuminating. I led them to the main conference room, where I'd set up a presentation that would have made my old marketing team proud. Charts, graphs, financial projections. Everything looked perfectly professional and innocent. Margaret settled into her chair with that familiar smirk, already preparing to tear apart whatever amateur work she expected to see. Before we begin, I said, I should mention that I've taken the liberty of inviting a few additional observers to today's meeting. Margaret's eyebrow arched. Observers? The conference room door opened, and 3 people entered. Harrison Webb, my lawyer, looking distinguished in his charcoal suit. Robert Chen, CEO of Winters Resort Group, whom neither Margaret nor Marcus would recognize. And Janet Morrison, the former Riverside manager, whose presence made Margaret's face go pale. What is this? Margaret demanded, her composure cracking slightly. This is a comprehensive performance review, I said calmly, though perhaps not the kind you were expecting. I clicked to my first slide. Riverside Mountain Resort, a case study in systematic sabotage. Margaret shot to her feet. This is completely inappropriate. I don't know what game you think you're playing, Alexandra, but… Sit down, I said quietly. Something in my tone made her pause. Maybe it was the confidence that had been missing during our last encounter. Maybe it was the way Robert Chen was watching her with cold, calculating eyes. Whatever it was, she sat. Let's start with the numbers, I continued, clicking to the next slide. According to Pinnacle's reports to Winters Resort Group, Riverside has been consistently underperforming due to market conditions and location challenges. But here's what those reports don't show. The slide displayed a detailed breakdown of every maintenance request, every budget allocation, every staffing decision from the past 3 years. Of the 47 maintenance requests submitted by previous managers, 39 were denied or delayed by Pinnacle Corporate. Not because of budget constraints. Winters Resort Group approved the maintenance budget in full each year. The requests were denied by Pinnacle management, specifically by Margaret Thornton's office. Margaret's face was flushing red. That's taken out of context. We have to prioritize. Prioritize what? I clicked to the next slide, showing photographs. A leaking roof in the main lobby that went unrepaired for 8 months? Broken heating systems in guest rooms during peak winter season? These weren't luxury upgrades, Margaret. These were basic safety and comfort issues. Marcus was leaning forward now, studying the screen with growing alarm. Margaret, is this accurate? It's a matter of budget allocation and… No, I interrupted. It's a matter of deliberate sabotage, and I can prove it. The next slide showed email chains, communications between Margaret's office and regional maintenance coordinators. In black and white, there it was. Margaret explicitly instructing contractors to delay Riverside repairs in favor of higher priority properties. These emails show a clear pattern, I continued. Riverside wasn't failing due to market conditions. It was being systematically starved of resources. The question is why? I looked directly at Margaret, whose power suit suddenly didn't look quite so intimidating. Janet, would you like to share your experience? Janet Morrison stood up, her voice steady and clear. "I was sent to Riverside in 2019 after filing a complaint about Margaret's treatment of female employees. The complaint was buried, and I was transferred within a week. During my time here, I submitted detailed proposals for improving operations, marketing strategies, cost reduction measures, partnership opportunities. Every single proposal was rejected by Margaret's office without explanation." "That's not," Margaret started. "I have the emails," Janet said simply. "All of them, including the one where you called my proposals waste-of-time ideas from someone who clearly doesn't understand hospitality management." Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "Margaret, what is she talking about?" But I wasn't finished. Janet wasn't the only one. Over the past 5 years, 6 different employees were transferred to Riverside after crossing Margaret. David Park, who questioned her budget allocations. Sarah Williams, who reported her for verbal abuse. Tom Rodriguez, who suggested a more inclusive hiring practice. "This is ridiculous," Margaret snapped, but her voice was shaking now. "You can't prove—" "I can prove all of it," I said calmly, "because I spent the last 3 weeks documenting everything. Every pattern of retaliation, every deliberately sabotaged career, every violation of both company policy and federal employment law." I clicked to the next slide. A detailed legal analysis prepared by Harrison's firm. "What you've been doing, Margaret, isn't just unethical. It's illegal. Workplace retaliation, creating hostile work environments, systematic discrimination, breach of fiduciary duty, the list goes on." Margaret was staring at the screen like she was watching her career explode in real time, which, to be fair, she was. "But here's the most interesting part," I continued. "Your systematic sabotage of Riverside didn't just destroy careers. It cost money. A lot of money." The final slide showed the financial analysis Robert's team had prepared. Due to Pinnacle's mismanagement, Riverside has underperformed its revenue projections by approximately $3.2 million over the past 3 years. But here's what's really fascinating. In just 3 weeks of proper management, we've already seen a 23% increase in bookings for next season. Marcus was frantically taking notes, sweat beading on his forehead. "The improvements weren't magic," I said. "I simply did what any competent manager would do. I approved necessary repairs, implemented basic marketing strategies, and treated the staff like human beings instead of obstacles to overcome." Margaret found her voice, though it came out as more of a croak. You can't do this. You're just a junior manager. You don't have the authority to—" "That's where you're wrong," I said softly. I clicked to a new slide, the Winters Resort Group corporate structure, with one name highlighted at the very top. "Margaret, I'd like you to meet your actual employer. This is Robert Chen, CEO of Winters Resort Group. Robert, this is Margaret Thornton, the woman who's been systematically destroying your property while billing you for management services." The silence in the room was deafening. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "But more importantly," I continued, "I'd like to introduce myself properly. Margaret, Marcus, meet Alexandra Winters, sole owner and chairman of Winters Resort Group, your boss's boss's boss." The color drained from Margaret's face so completely I thought she might faint. That's impossible," she whispered. "My grandmother, Elena Winters, founded this company. When she died 6 months ago, she left everything to me, including this property, including the management contracts, including the authority to terminate agreements with companies that breach their fiduciary duties." I stood up and walked around the table, stopping directly in front of Margaret's chair. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to resign from Pinnacle effective immediately. You're going to return every penny of your salary from the past year, since you've been defrauding my company. And you're going to sign a statement admitting to your pattern of workplace retaliation and sabotage. You can't, or," I continued, "I can pursue criminal charges for fraud, file federal complaints for workplace discrimination, and sue you personally for the $3.2 million in damages your sabotage cost my company. Your choice." Margaret looked desperately at Marcus, who was staring at his hands and clearly calculating how to distance himself from the disaster. "Marcus," she pleaded, "you can't let her—" "Margaret," Marcus said quietly. I think you should listen to Ms. Winters. The fight went out of her all at once. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time since I'd known her, Margaret Thornton looked like what she really was. A small, petty person who'd finally been caught. What do you want me to sign? She asked in a broken voice. Harrison stepped forward with a folder. These documents detail your resignation, the return of salary, and your admission of misconduct. They also include a non-disclosure agreement that prevents you from speaking publicly about this situation, and a non-compete clause that prohibits you from working in hospitality management for 2 years. Margaret's hand shook as she reached for the pen. There's one more thing, I said as she signed her career away. I want you to personally apologize to every employee you sent here as punishment, starting with Janet. Margaret looked up at Janet Morrison, her eyes filled with something that might have been genuine remorse, or might have been terror at the legal consequences if she refused. Janet, I'm sorry. What I did to you was wrong. It was petty and cruel, and you didn't deserve it. Janet nodded curtly. Thank you. That's more than I expected to ever hear. After Margaret had signed everything and been escorted from the property by hotel security, a final humiliation that seemed fitting, I found myself alone with Marcus. Ms. Winters, he said, clearly struggling to find the right words. I had no idea what Margaret was doing. If I had known... Marcus, let me ask you something. In your 3 years as regional VP, how many times did you visit Riverside? He looked uncomfortable. With my schedule, 0 times. You never once came here to see what was actually happening. You took Margaret's word for everything and never bothered to verify whether your most remote property was being properly managed. I trusted her judgment. You trusted her judgment because it was convenient. It was easier to believe that Riverside was failing due to market conditions than to investigate why your most beautiful property was consistently underperforming. Marcus nodded miserably. You're right. I failed in my oversight duties. Yes, you did. Which brings me to my next decision. I handed him a folder that Harrison had prepared. Pinnacle's management contract with Winters Resort Group is terminated effective immediately. We'll be managing all our properties internally from now on. Marcus's face went white. Ms. Winters, please. The Winters account is worth millions to Pinnacle. If you terminate our contract, your company will lose approximately $12 million in annual revenue, plus face potential lawsuits from the other properties you've been mismanaging. Yes, I'm aware. Please, Marcus said desperately. Give us another chance. I'll personally ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. I looked out the conference room window at the snow-capped mountains, thinking about all the employees who'd been crushed by Margaret's petty revenge, all the potential that had been wasted, all the damage that had been done. Marcus, some mistakes are too big to recover from. This is one of them. The news of Margaret's downfall spread through the hospitality industry like wildfire. Not the specific details. The NDA prevented that. But word got out that she'd been forced to resign in disgrace and was banned from hospitality management. Janet Morrison called me 2 weeks later, laughing with pure joy. Alexandra, you won't believe this. Margaret applied for a job at our competitor down the valley, a junior associate position, basically fetching coffee and filing paperwork. When they called me for a reference, she paused, savoring the moment. I told them the truth. She's unemployable in this industry. Meanwhile, Riverside Mountain Resort was transformed. With proper funding, competent management, and motivated staff, it became everything it was meant to be. By spring, we were booked solid for the entire summer season. By winter, hospitality magazines were writing features about our miraculous turnaround. I decided to stay on as the property's manager, at least for the first year. I loved the mountains. I loved the work. And I loved proving that what Margaret had intended as my professional grave had become the foundation of something extraordinary. The final piece of poetic justice came 6 months later. I was having lunch at a restaurant in town when I spotted a familiar figure waiting tables in the corner. Margaret looked older, more tired, wearing a cheap uniform instead of designer power suits. She was working at a chain restaurant, struggling to remember orders and looking miserable. She saw me at the same time I saw her. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the dining room. Then she looked away and hurried into the kitchen. I didn't approach her. I didn't gloat or make a scene. The sight of her reduced circumstances was satisfaction enough. Some might say I was too harsh. That destroying someone's career completely was excessive revenge for what she'd done to me. But I wasn't thinking about just me. I was thinking about Janet Morrison, whose innovative ideas were dismissed without consideration. I was thinking about David Park, whose budget questions were met with exile. I was thinking about Sarah Williams, who'd tried to report workplace abuse and was punished for it. Margaret hadn't just tried to destroy my career. She'd made a habit of destroying careers, crushing anyone who challenged her or threatened her position. She'd turned what should have been a beautiful, successful property into a professional death sentence for anyone unlucky enough to cross her path. Sometimes people need to face the full consequences of their actions. Sometimes the quiet ones you underestimate turn out to have the power to end you completely. And sometimes the place meant to be your grave becomes the foundation of your empire. Today, I run Winters Resort Group from my office in the mountains of Montana, overseeing a network of properties across 3 countries. The industry magazines call me a hospitality visionary and a transformational leader. What they don't know is that my transformation began in a sterile HR office on a Tuesday morning, with a woman who thought she could destroy me with a transfer to the mountains. Margaret Thornton taught me an invaluable lesson about power, revenge, and the importance of never underestimating the people you try to destroy. I sent her a thank you card last Christmas. I thought she deserved to know how much I appreciated the education.